16E, and this is a City of Santa Cruz coastal permit decision that's been appealed to the Commission. And I'm asking Rosie Brady, who's with our Central Coast District Office, to give the staff presentation. And I'll also note that Friday of this week is Ms. Brady's last day with the Commission, so you get to meet her today. She gets to present, and then she will be moving along. To the detriment of the Commission, I may add.
Good afternoon, Chair Kinsey and Commissioners. Item 16E is an appeal of a City of Santa Cruz approved coastal development permit to prohibit RV parking on city streets between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. As you will hear in more detail as I proceed, staff recommends that the Commission find that the appeal does not raise a substantial issue with conformance to the city's certified LCP or the public access policies of the Coastal Act. Next slide, please. As I indicated, the approved city coastal permit prohibits parking RVs on city streets between midnight and 5 a.m. This restriction does not apply to cars, SUVs, or trucks. The city's approval also includes a permit program that allows Santa Cruz residents to obtain up to 6 permits annually to park an RV for up to 72 hours on city streets. In any case, however, the city's program prohibits anyone from sleeping overnight in an RV on city streets, regardless of whether the RV is allowed to be parked overnight by permit. Next slide, please. The city spent many hours debating and discussing issues surrounding overnight RV parking with significant public involvement in that discussion, and ultimately arrived at the program before you today. As shown in slide 3, the city indicates that the RV parking restrictions are necessary to address public health and safety concerns from certain unlawful behaviors and nuisance activities that have been associated with overnight RV parking. Specifically, the city has identified drug and crime associated with overnight RVs, including some 400 notices per year, the majority of which were parking infractions, as well as theft, litter, and several cases of illegal wastewater dumping. Next slide, please. The appellant contends that the approved project would violate the LCP because it does not provide maximum public access to people of all income levels, namely those who live in RVs, and because the city does not provide an alternative for the people who live in RVs and cannot afford to pay to stay in an RV park. The appellant also contends that the overnight RV parking permit program discriminates against those who do not live in Santa Cruz or do not know someone who lives in Santa Cruz. Finally, the appellant contends there is inadequate evidence to show that the city's action will protect water quality. Next slide, please. With respect to public access, the LCP and the Coastal Act require maximum public access, but also require that public access opportunities be understood in context, and that they be provided consistent with good coastal resource planning principles, including consistent with public safety needs. Overnight parking restrictions often are proposed in local jurisdictions because of identified problems related to coastal resource protection, public safety, public nuisance, inappropriate camping, and other issues. In such cases, it is important that the problem be clearly identified and substantiated, and the response be as focused as possible to address the problem while avoiding public access impacts as much as possible. The Commission has approved a number of such overnight parking restrictions, including here in Santa Cruz, when the facts of the case warrant. In this case, the city had initially proposed to restrict RV parking from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. In response to concerns expressed, including from your staff, that this was too broad of a time frame, the city limited the parking restriction hours from midnight to 5 a.m., similar to a parking restriction on West Cliff Drive and Pelton Avenue that was previously approved by the Commission in 2007. Thus, RV users will still be able to park and access the coast for most of the day. Between midnight and 5 a.m., however, and consistent with other Commission-approved parking restrictions on the west side of Santa Cruz, they will need to use RV facilities or, in some cases, can stay in parking lots of certain identified churches and businesses in the city that allow such RV parking for free. We believe that the program has been appropriately narrowed to avoid public access impacts, and that the city's action does not raise a substantial issue with respect to the Coastal Act and the LCP's public access requirements. With respect to water quality, the program should only serve to better protect water quality, and there is no indication that it is not consistent with LCP on this point. Next slide, please. In conclusion, Commission staff has worked closely with the City to ensure that the RV parking prohibition is limited to late-night hours, that will limit its impact on public access parking, and that it will not have a significant public access impact overall. As a result, we feel that the City-approved project does not raise substantial LCP or Coastal Act conformance issues, and we recommend that the Commission decline to take jurisdiction over the coastal permit for this project. The motion is found on page 4 of the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any ex partes on this? Seeing none, I'd like to invite Robert Norse up for up to 3 minutes to speak on your appeal, and then you'll be followed by Julie Shalil and Deborah Lashever, who will have also 3 minutes. Welcome. Thank you.
First of all, I'm in this outfit to dramatize the situation of people who have no choice but to sleep in their RVs or even outside. Public access and recreation requirements of the Coastal Act require maximum public recreational opportunities. This law clearly excludes them for low-income folks who suddenly have no place to park their vans at night. The city's account of there being accessible places is an error. The alleged problems are parking related to public safety, as have been outlined, and other issues outlined by your staff, but these have not been clearly identified and substantiated in terms other than anecdotal. The 400 illegal parking citations and 4 instances of illegal dumping in 1 year are not specific to the complaints. There's no evidence of arrests or convictions. This is rather the presence of poor people in RVs, which makes well-to-do residents uncomfortable. There's no documented connection here. The city has reduced the proposed law's sweep after initially considering it to maybe a 24-hour ban. You didn't reach that. It didn't reach you that point, but their objective is clear. However, the ordinance is citywide, even though you're only considering the Coastal Act aspect of it, and it's specifically tailored to impact the poorer. If the Coastal Commission finds there is no substantial issue here and subsequently approves the law, it would essentially be banning RV parking late at night throughout the entire city. Unlike Santa Barbara, there's been no attempt to provide public, safe parking spaces. Permits are not available to the poor. Very few churches and businesses I know of actually allow RVs to park. This impacts disability people significantly, and the city did not look into this issue. I spoke with Scott Collins, who's here in the audience. He can confirm that we had that conversation. He put together this ordinance to some extent, or at least forwarded it. This gated NIMBY policy ignores whether or not people who live in RVs are law-abiding, environmentally conscious, and respectful of their neighbors. Unlike in other cities, neighborhoods would not have the option to vote on this law, as is the case in Santa Cruz with other vehicle bans. There's no clear documentation of the number of vehicles impacted, the number of families who live in vehicles impacted, nor the truly accessible alternative resources available. While I appreciate the staff's interest in finding a compromise, this plan is not it. City Council needs to re-examine the law more carefully and accurately document real problems and devise a more carefully considered law that does not violate broader coastal access and, frankly, the welfare of the most vulnerable, the disabled, and poor. To pander to the fear agenda of some property-owning residents is not the job of this commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I would like to invite up Julie and Deborah to share the 3 minutes, however you would choose to, between you. Well,
Hi, my name is Deborah Lashever. I'm a resident of Santa Cruz. The substantial issue, you want to know if there's a legal and factual support for this ordinance. There's not. The Department of Justice just came out with a statement recently to make clear the unconstitutionality of anti-camping ordinances. It is against the criminalization of homelessness. There is no other place for people to go. The staff put together a report saying that there are all these churches and businesses that are available. I spent the good part of 4 days calling. There are no places. I promise you. I called SCPD, I called 211, I called everybody. There are no existing places, and just hoping that there may be some doesn't make it illegal for you to make a law when there aren't any places for people to park.
Right.
That's illegal. You can't do that.
You know, actually, Ms. Lashiver, you would have been required to have shared your time with Mr. Norse because you're speaking in opposition to the staff's recommendation.
Yes, I am.
And
well, can I ask a question then of
may.
staff? I talked to Rosie yesterday on the phone to try to see, because I spent 4 days calling around to try to find these places that are available. There aren't any available, and she said yesterday she would do due diligence to see if she could find anybody. I'd like to ask her if she found anybody.
We will be able to ask her to respond to that, but thank you. And then now I would like to invite up Julie Shalil, and you would have the opportunity to speak in support of it, and I'm assuming that that's in support of what the staff's recommendation. Is that correct?
I am not speaking in support of the staff recommendations. I am speaking in opposition of the RV ban.
Okay, so then you would not be speaking.
Thank you.
Because we only take 3 minutes from each side, and so you're speaking in opposition.
They've spoken well for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Then we'll bring it back to the staff, and
The city's here as well.
well, they don't have a card in, so
Perhaps they could speak and then submit a speaker card.
we'll be glad to let them do that. Thanks. It's going to get answered, please. Okay, so please state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes,
Great.
and you'll also fill out a card.
Will do. Scott Collins, Deputy City Manager for the City of Santa Cruz. Thank you so much for having us here today. We hope you support this reasonable measure employed by nearly 100 California communities to address public safety issues. Long-term overnight RV parking creates impacts across the entire city. It limits parking in neighborhoods and near parks. There's incidents of illegal dumping, trash, spent needles left behind, and general concerns of public safety, because these neighbors don't know who are in these RVs that are parking for long periods of time near their homes. And as one member of the public said, our streets are not designed to be RV parking lots. And in many ways, that's what it has become in our city. Residents have appealed to the city for well over 10 years on this issue. This is not new, and this is not a fear-mongering situation. They simply want to have their neighborhoods to be safe. And we have very limited tools at this time to address the issue. We can only use the state's law around vehicle storage, which means a person can park for 72 hours without moving along before we could tag them, and then they'd have another 72 hours. That's almost an entire week. This is completely unsatisfactory, and that's why the residents have demanded something different. This ordinance, which is a very narrow parking restriction on a very small subset of vehicles, is completely reasonable, and as your staff notes, would have no significant impact on bona fide public access to the coast, as this regulation only applies to very limited hours of 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. RV owners can access the coast 19 hours out of the day and find multiple low-cost accommodations within Santa Cruz County for RV parking. We want to thank coastal staff for their hard work on this and their compromise and willingness to work with the city to make sure we're in conformance with our LCP and the Coastal Act. We please ask that you deny this appeal, provide the city